All right, today is day 17 out of the day 30 challenge, and I'm just noticing that the lighting is kind of bad, so apologies about that. It is currently, yeah, it's quite questionable, like 2:30 a.m. in the morning. I couldn't sleep for some reason, so I decided to yap. Um, so today I kind of finished a book that I really liked based off the cover and the topic is namely that bubbles, if you think about bubbles on the stock market, they actually bring us new frontier technology that we all need, in terms of thinking as technology as salvation, where we see technology as our last hope. Now, with this mindset, obviously there are a few errors if you run into it and you're kind of leaving humanity out of it. But the main idea is that you push towards new frontier science that helps us, overcome challenges like climate change, rising cancer rates, all that stuff. And the book that I finished is called Boom. Yeah, I know it has a longer title here, but we'll just call it Boom. Um, and the main thesis is that if you see bubbles, it's actually a good sign because there are some bubbles. Disclaimer, they're not talking about all bubbles. I'll explain why. Because some bubbles, like the AI bubble, might be a really good thing. You might ask, well, why? Because if you remember the previous bubbles, you had the 2008 financial crisis, you had COVID. Every time you had a bubble and it burst, you just saw billions of assets vanish. People lost homes, people lost their jobs. So it's obviously not a good thing. But in terms of technology that is overhyped, a good reference to that is the dot-com bubble because the AI bubble didn't burst yet. The dot-com bubble did. Now, the dot-com bubble, if you don't know what that is, started in Silicon Valley in 19 late nine, yeah, I think somewhere around the 2000s, where, companies like PayPal, I think even Netflix, all these came into fruition and they all had the dot com at the end. So that's why you call this bubble the dot com bubble. And essentially, what happened was that you had so many companies doing an IPO that is going to the stock market, so many companies that did an IPO that was so overvalued just because they had a .com in their name that the bubble essentially burst. And one of the few remaining companies out of this bubble, I think there's a number where it says that only half of startups actually survived the dot-com bubble was PayPal, for instance. So PayPal survived the dot-com crash, became, probably the most used internet service for money transaction and payments, besides bank transfers. So these are the guys that kind of survived the dot-com bubble. And if you look at PayPal, they introduced a new kind of payment for all of us, right? Well, I wasn't born at that time, but for people who were at the time. So they introduced new payments, new ways to communicate with technologies. By the way, Google also survived the dot-com bubble, I think, and they did change how we search for data. So you see, there are positive upsides to this, but we're not downplaying the risks, but I think you get the idea. Now, with AI, if we know how the dot-com bubble kind of happened, with AI, you are seeing the same thing actually. You have probably overpriced companies like AMD and Nvidia. By the way, I'm not giving financial advice on any of this, I'm just saying my remarks. So these companies, the chip makers, let's say chip makers and all these software giants like Oracle, Google, Microsoft, there was a graph, I think, published by the Financial Times that showed a Venn diagram that is circles of companies where they just send each other money without having the chips. So what currently is happening and why a lot of people are freaking out is that OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT, for instance, going to AMD and NVIDIA and telling them, hey, I need chips. Like I need your architecture to run my large language models. They give them the money, NVIDIA takes it, and they just say, well, we got money, we got OpenAI what they need when they didn't. So essentially what's happening is you have certain time frames where company A pays company B, and maybe company C also pays company B because NVIDIA and AMD, in that sense, are the foundation of the tech of AI that everybody's using. Oracle, Apple, Microsoft, everybody uses it. So they pay all NVIDIA, but they're not getting anything back at that time. So a lot of people are just saying, well, they're just sending money around. Like they're not exchanging actually products. Because NVIDIA has such a high demand, they can't actually go and say, well, we deliver the chips all to you in a month. That's not happening. So that's kind of like the AI bubble where a lot of people are, well, they're just sending money around. Another thing is that a lot of companies are going on IPOs and a lot of VCs are investing into these AI startups, where most of them seem to be ChatGPT wrappers. That is, they just use ChatGPT as kind of like a ground model and focus on developing a mini app or a mini software that does one task exceptionally well. And for that, you're just using existing tech. Now, why is this still a positive sign? Because all bubbles have one thing in common. They bring attention, money, and talent to one topic. So for AI, that is, they bring the best engineers and researchers from essentially all areas of science because you need to understand the exact issues in different parts of science to develop really good large language models or any AI models. I mean, a doctor knows how to diagnose a cancer patient the best. It's not the machine learning engineer. Then you have the money. So you have the US government trying to do something similar like the Apollo program, but with AI. I think they call it Project Genesis, where they officially launched kind of like a race against China for AI development. So that's huge, right? Government is getting involved. Then you have talent. No, we had talent. What else? I forgot what I wanted to say, but in essence, you have a lot of resources for this technology. Now, even when the AI bubble is going to burst, you still have some surviving companies that have developed a certain trait that kept them alive. Maybe it's luck, but maybe it is actually a frontier science. And so this book argues that every time, you even have a bubble that is bursting, you still have a positive outcome because you have companies surviving. Because if no one were to survive, you might assume that, the technology was trash. So we'll see. I mean, I like the idea of the book because we all kind of think, oh, bubbles, we don't really want to take part in that. But that's exactly where, a lot of opportunities lie ahead. Because the next bubble might be quantum computing, might be biotech actually, might be crypto. Like, I don't know. But the more you know about these bubbles and the more you know about frontier science, the less, or like the more you are right to invest in certain companies and profit from bubbles. Because I think that's a lot what a lot of people want to do. They want to see bubbles, invest, hold the stocks, maybe sell some during the height of a bubble, hold the stocks, buy in when they just fell instead of shortening because not a lot of us are pro traders. We just can't short against companies and risk losing with a 5 times leverage. You get what I'm saying? Anyways, I think that's what I wanted to say. Um, and thank you for listening. See you for tomorrow.